Hey everyone, welcome to the CyberHub Engage podcast. James Azar here, your loyal host. You are about to listen to an exclusive in the fact that this was our first ever live podcast. We were in Dallas, Texas, not even our home court. It's great content. So before we get started into that though, a quick message from our supporting sponsors for this event. All right, friends, let's talk about one of our podcast supporters, PlexTrack. When it comes to security assessments, I think we can all agree on one thing: reporting sucks. I know I hate writing reports, which is why I pawn it off to my staff, but not all of you could do that. Red teams hate that there's no platform that gives them what they need to efficiently and consistently deliver their best reports. Blue teams and CISOs and VPs hate copying and pasting findings from all these multiple sources, all these different Excels, into some sort of ticketing system that then generates some sort of analytics reports that's really jimmy-rigged. And so PlexTrack, our sponsors and friends, have finally solved the pain of security assessment reporting for the red and blue teams all in one. For red teams, PlexTrack's custom templating and write-up repository ensures consistency across reports. Reports can be delivered in the browser or exported to a custom Word and PDF document if you still live in that world. For blue team, PlexTrack aggregates security issues into dynamic reports that enables remediation collaboration. Further analytics visually tell the story of the security posture to the C-suite, helping give a complete and final picture for everyone. As a loyal CyberHub Engage listener, you have a special offer of a free 30-day, no contracts, no credit cards, no risks trial of their amazing platform. So go to plextrack.com/CyberHub. Again, that's PlexTrack, PLEXTRACS for Charlie, /CyberHub to get your free month of trial on their platform. I will tell you this, I've seen it, I love it. People who have tried this platform have given us rave reviews on it. It really does simplify the red team, blue team communication and helps us all be far more organized in reporting our vulnerabilities. So again, go to plextrack.com/CyberHub for a free 30-day trial. Do you know where all your keys are stored? Do you know how many certificates and keys you have? Are you managing keys in multiple environments? If you don't have a secure cryptographic foundation, chances are you're struggling to understand the status and security of your cryptographic keys. Unbound's key security and management experts can help. Our FIBS validated cryptographic key security and management platform allows you to maintain visibility of all your keys, whether on-prem or in the cloud, without compromising on your security. Know exactly where your keys are and how they're being used. Manage them all with a single pane of glass. Automate operations in your organizations while saving time and money and manpower on doing just that. With Unbound, your enterprise can achieve agility and efficiency, gain control, and reduce risk. Today, Unbound is offering CyberHub Engage listeners a free demo of their cryptographic key management technology. Just go to bit.ly-getunbound. Again, that's bit.ly/getunbound for a direct ability to book your free demo of their cryptographic key management technology, which will help you secure your organization. Again, that's bit.ly-getunbound. This podcast is sponsored by Armor. Armor is a global cybersecurity software company that simplifies protecting data and application in private, public, or hybrid cloud environments. Armor Anywhere provides technology to detect and respond to threats and can be activated in minutes. Armor also helps organizations comply to major regulatory frameworks and control. Armor combines workload protection, analytics from cloud-native sources, and other security data to provide unparalleled insight into threats facing organizations. Armor cybersecurity experts monitor environments 24/7, and if an attack takes place, helps customers respond quickly and effectively. Armor protects over 1,000 customers in over 40 countries, so contact them today at armor.com. Again, that's ARMOR.com at armor.com. In today's modern threat landscape, organizations must evolve past legacy PAM solutions to keep up with malicious actors. That's why Remediant leads with innovation, delivering enterprise-class cybersecurity solutions that enable real-time monitoring, zero-trust protection of privileged accounts, and just-in-time administrations across IT and security ecosystems. Based on a zero-trust model, our Secure One PAM solution ensures privileged access is precisely allocated and continuously inventoried by granting privileges access on a just-in-time, just-enough basis using multi-factor authentication. To further validate Remediant's solution and JIT approach, Gartner mentions Remediant in its new report, Remove Standing Privileges Through a Just-in-Time PAM Approach. To find out more about Remediant, head over to remediant.com. That's REMEDIANT.com. Go to remediant.com or click the link in the description of this podcast for a direct link to remediant.com.
All right, so we're back with Mark Houpt, the CISO at DataBank. For those who's never heard my show, he's never been on it, ever. Never. I've only had to edit 2 shows. He's one of them.
Wasn't because of what I said. Or maybe it was.
You did encourage me, and we'll stop there.
Because I'm about ready to encourage you again, right?
Yes. Yes, you are. And we've got Ryan, our very kind host. Ryan, welcome.
Thank you.
So this panel, who here is in auditing and compliance? Show of hands. Great, you're going to love this panel. It's all about auditing. Yay. So, woohoo, yeah, thank you for the cheer. For our young cybersecurity student, cyber gets a lot more interesting than auditing. Don't give up because of this next panel. Yeah, someone's trying to say auditing is cool. I hope we got that in a. It'll be like that Greta Thunberg, how dare you? Auditing is cool. All right, so Mark, we'll kind of get started. So auditing. CISOs are under constant auditing. I'm going through a few myself as we speak. So, but here's the thing about auditing. They take up a lot of our money, a lot of our time. And what do you do in order to really streamline and excel auditing, lower the costs, and get max value?
Yeah, so I've got my compliance team here, and they're gonna say, wait, what? You do what? So they're my audit reactors, but in reality, what we try to do is we try to schedule our audits in a way that's efficient. We schedule, so we're a FedRAMP authorized provider at DataBank. And so we have to go through an annual 3PAO assessment. That's a completely different kind of quote unquote audit, because how dare we call it an audit? It's an assessment. But it's a completely different process than doing an SSA 18, PCI, AOC, ROC, HIPAA audit, so on and so forth. So we schedule that during our springtime, and then we do our other audits in the late summer and fall, because those audits take a different kind of company and a different approach. And what we try to do is we try to do the audits every 6 months, and there's a reason for that. One is the efficiency of pulling different kinds of data at different times. So you can use the same data, the same reports, the same artifacts and evidence for your HIPAA, PCI, SSA 18, SOC 1, SOC 2 audits. You can use the same evidence for all of those. And you can deal with the same auditors typically for all of those. So you're dealing with one group for that batch. So that helps with efficiency. It helps with pricing as well, because you can get in and say, hey, we want to do all of these things, bundle it together, typical, bundle the price and you get a better deal kind of situation. And it helps, helps with my audit team and the people that have to pull the data. But doing that efficiency piece is important. The financial efficiency piece of it's important, but there's another aspect of having those two done every 6 months is it gives me a check. It's kind of like a continuous monitoring, a ConMon check on my environment by a third party every 6 months. It tells me what's going on. My FedRAMP audit prepares me, or assessment prepares me for my SSA 18. Nothing should surprise me during my SSA 18 batch, because a lot of the physical security has been done and a lot of the access control pieces have been done in the spring, and then vice versa exists. If I do it again in the fall, nothing should surprise me in the spring for the FedRAMP side of things. So that's the perfect way to do it, if you will. That's the way I want to do it. And then you have business requirements that come into place that disrupt all that from time to time. You have for example, with FedRAMP, you might have a significant change that requires you to do stuff in between. But overall, if we do it at 6-month intervals, we're using one audit to prepare for the other, to check up on our environment, make sure things are all good and ready to roll.
Yeah, so I think piggyback kind of towards the end there is, how do we make compliance a continuous conversation rather than a point in time conversation? So one of the tactics is to do audits more regularly, every 6 months, so you're always gathering evidence. Another would be to use technology to help you streamline, whether it's evidence gathering, reporting, having the appropriate security controls in place, your retention of your logs. Technology plays a great role in accelerating the compliance timelines a lot of times. And then I would say, from to a point that was made earlier in the audience, is having good relationships with all of the stakeholders, because audits driven a lot by the GRC teams. It's a lot of times viewed in the rest of the organization as, oh, not them again. It's kind of like the lawyers of the company, right? But if you have those good relationships, if you have internal audit teams that you can rely on, if it is much more of a dialogue throughout the year rather than, like I said, a point in time exercise where everybody is hurry up and wait and get these systems in place, that helps a lot to going towards streamlining cost.
I think one of the things I kind of want to maybe dig a little bit deeper on is, how are you managing, or how do you manage really all the different stakeholders within the auditing in a continuous auditing model, right? Because typically, you can't always get everyone's attention continuously in auditing. That's one thing. And then and I'm gonna have you answer that here in just a second. I want to point out one thing. The one of the things that Ryan just said about continuous auditing and gathering evidence plays a huge part if you're ever in a ransomware attack and you need to file an insurance claim. If you have all your evidence and all your ducks lined up in a row, you're more likely to win your claim. But we'll go.
So in terms of getting stakeholder buy-in, is make them feel ownership of the systems that they're in control of that are in scope for an audit. So this goes into, one of the topics around the cloud is that everybody has become an owner of infrastructure these days. So whether I'm a DevOps person and I'm deploying 1,000 times a day, or I'm the company's application architect, I can now go deploy infrastructure at will. Well, kind of like Spider-Man, great power comes great responsibility. If I can go deploy that infrastructure, I have to feel ownership for the security and compliance of that infrastructure as well. So, weekly meetings, some of the reporting from some of the tools that you get nowadays really makes people feel ownership of, okay, well, if I'm going to put a system out there, then I'm going to be the one that ultimately is responsible for, putting the controls in place that I need to.
Yeah, reality is it's also very hard, especially the smaller the company you're in, and getting time on people's calendars and getting them to respond to the audit requests is one of the most difficult things that I've seen in not just where I'm at now, but in other other roles, other companies that I've been in, because time is a very precious thing when you're not in the chain of command of the individual that you're asking for the data from. And so, for example, if you're asking for data from the physical security team, or if you're asking for data from the network engineering team, and they're in another chain of command, they're in the operations team, or they're in the underneath the chief technology officer, or something along those lines, they've got their bosses driving things down on them as well. So one of the things I've done is I've hired relentless um, a relentless it's hard for me to say dog, but that's not true, because poor Callie's not a dog, but she's relentless in going after these people that haven't turned in their stuff on time. So let's call her a relentless teacher looking for homework, right? And she just goes after she just goes after it, and I don't have to worry about it. But the cool thing is that with her is that we play a little bit good cop bad cop. I mean, she goes after this stuff, and when it needs to get escalated because it's just not happening, then she gets me involved as the CISO to come and lay down the hammer and talk to my C-level counterparts and say, hey, why isn't your team doing what they're supposed to be doing? Don't give me any excuses. You're now holding up the audit. You're now holding up the assessment. Um, and so I let her build the relationships. I let her build the handshakes and the hey, second and third notifications, and then I come in and be the bad guy and say, hey, now you're in trouble. Dad's coming down now. So I think there's a little bit of an important piece of that is fighting for the time with in a small company. As far and when I say small, I mean small in number of people resources. Fighting for everybody, with everybody for their time when audits are a drudgery sometimes.
I think it goes back to how do we make security and compliance a part of business culture rather than some external thing that always happens at the end of a process, at the end of a deployment, at the end of a audit cycle. So I think for the CISOs and BISOs listening, it's about how do you create a culture of security and compliance as opposed to it always being kind of this directive led thing. Which is harder said than done. But if it comes as like a cultural responsibility, or you feel empowered to take responsibility for that, then it's going to be a little bit easier conversation when you need to go hunt somebody down and beat them over the head.
So kind of transitioning us, you brought up the cloud earlier. The cloud transformation, the transition into the cloud is there. We're in it. It's a buzzword I'd like to bury also. And so, yeah. But one of the aspects of auditing, obviously, is working with your cloud providers. And in one of the early episodes Mark and I did, one of the things we discussed was try to go audit AWS. Good luck. How do you manage auditing your cloud providers? What points in the audit are people overlooking, and what's the right way to really start approaching the cloud transformation from an auditing perspective?
Yeah, sure. So from an auditing perspective, one, ask. All of the documentation exists on which are the major public cloud services, have what compliance standards behind them. But then the second part is realize it's a shared responsibility, almost like 99% of the time. So the cloud is going to go so far in saying, hey, these services and the infrastructure behind these services is compliant in XYZ manner against these standards. But just like what was shown with the Capital One breach is that, we kind of rush to blame the supply chain a lot of times of, hey, we got breached because there must be something wrong with AWS. Well, no, it was a shared responsibility where they had misconfigured something in the cloud. So, I think the documentation in the literature, all the major public clouds are starting to do a really good job of addressing the compliance story. But them addressing it is not the same as you addressing it. And that's why, you're still required to sign BAAs with HIPAA and things like that.
Yeah, so I'm going to take this from there's a couple different perspectives that we can look at this from. So I'm going to take it from giving advice from a CISO at a quote unquote cloud provider, at a data center provider. I'm going to give you the advice that I should never give people because I'm telling you how to tackle me, right? So, first of all, your contract is supremely important. Your contract tells us how many times you can audit, and it tells you and I what you get in that audit, and it tells you what to expect. Sometimes customers come to us and they put very unreasonable expectations in those audits. For example, I have many times customers will come to me and say they have the right to audit anytime they want and we pay for it. We pay to allow them in the door and they have free reign of it and so on and so forth. Okay, that's being redlined right out the gate. An unreasonable expectation. But what is a reasonable expectation is that you as the customer should have the right to audit the services and the spaces that you contract for one time per year. Okay, put yourself in our shoes and ask yourself, would you like to be audited 20 times a year by one company that then turns around and now we've got 3,000 customers that want to do the same thing? Of course you wouldn't. We just don't have time for that. So that's one thing, is take a look at the contracts and make sure you have reasonable expectations, because we will redline those out if they're not, and we will allow for certain conditions if they are reasonable. Number two, realize there's boundaries. We use the term shared responsibility. I use the term boundary, and clearly understand what they are. There are too many customers out there that have bought into the AWS mindset that come to the cloud and everything's taken care of. That is the biggest fallacy that I keep hearing over and over and over again. It's not. Okay, there's a responsibility that I have as a provider, and there's responsibilities, I don't care how big or how small you are, that you have as a customer in these environments. And certainly don't come to me in the middle of an incident and say, I thought you were supposed to handle all these things. And then when you're presented with your services that you've signed up for, still continue to argue the point. You realize that sometimes you've just messed up, okay, as a customer. So that's another thing. And then finally realize that I have 3,000 customers, and what I'm going to do to try and service all 3,000 of you the best that I can is not individually service you, but provide you with the documentation necessary for you to meet your audits. Because understand that we've been through these audits. I've been doing cybersecurity for almost 30 years. I know what the auditors want, and I know what they're going to need to see. So we're going to provide you with your SSA 18, SOC 1, SOC 2 for our environment, a PCI AOC or a ROC that meets your needs, a HIPAA if it's a BAA type of environment, so on and so forth. And know that we're providing that documentation for you on a self-service portal. Even providing you with a Cloud Security Alliance CIIQ, an annual questionnaire. It's already filled out there. All these things are designed because we know that's what's going to meet the auditor's needs. So that's another piece to think about, is in your area of responsibility, going out and finding some of the information. Don't just listen to your auditors and expect to turn around and send it right back through, the question right back through, and expect us to to individually answer your questions. They're probably, as a provider, they're probably already answered there for you. Other things with do it from the other way. There's another way around.
So he just gave you his kind of way of looking at an audit as a CISO data bank. Now look at it from the CISO of data bank who's auditing someone.
So CISO of data bank is auditing someone,
You're not being audited.
right? Who are we going to audit?
Who are you auditing?
Well, our vendors, but we're doing that through questionnaires. We're not auditing them. We're doing due diligence questionnaires. So we have to understand. So we have to understand differences between terminology. A minute ago I was talking about assessments versus audits. They really are different conditions. And different discussions. A vendor questionnaire is nothing more than an attestation of what controls or what controls are in place and what actions are being taken to address those controls. So reality is, I'm not auditing anyone. I'm I am conducting attestation assessments of my vendors. And in that space, I can send out a questionnaire, but I have to be respectful of the fact that they're running their business and they're going to run it their way. And then I have to use the data that comes back as a risk analysis tool to determine whether I want to continue to do business with them. So there's a whole, like I said, there's a whole set of terminology. I mean, I know audit is a generic term, but there really is a difference between auditing, assessment, and questionnaire type of solutions. And you want to say something?
No, I mean, I was just going to say, it's amazing to me the number of companies who still don't have a standard way of evaluating third parties that they do business with. And it's why we've seen so many supply chain attacks over the last year proliferate, is because it's a lot easier to get in through your supply chain, some SaaS software you do business with, one of the cloud vendors, et cetera, than it is to come at you directly a lot of times. And so having, whether it's a questionnaire, a standard set of documents that you always ask for, like, hi, Mr. Cloud Provider, Mr. Third Party Vendor, what is your disaster recovery plan look like? How do you screen employees that you have at your business that might be interacting with the systems and data that reside within your environment? So I think not just having a questionnaire, but having a program in concert with your GRC team to help validate third party risk these days is extremely important.
So talking a little bit about how we audit third-party providers, if we look at the cloud transformation in general, it's changing how a lot of people do business. And you just talked about the supply chain. This is a question around auditing and supply chain, which is all the breaches last year were predominantly led by supply chain going through your SaaS provider, your cloud provider. You brought up Capital One. It was a simply misconfigured server, which, I mean, it was just a bad set of circumstances. I've been an advocate that Michael should have never been promoted to advisor of cybersecurity at Capital One. Thought he got the ultimate shaft there because he couldn't have handled it any better. I think you and I spoke about that. I mean, you couldn't have handled that breach any better. But how do we start to how do we accomplish a secure supply chain in the world of cloud?
Can you? That's where you have to start asking the question: Can you provide? Can you establish a secure supply chain? And I think it's incredibly difficult to do so, because you have how deep are you going to go into the supply chain? Let's put it that way, because companies like ours, we don't buy from vendors, like a well, we don't I'm trying to say this right. We don't buy direct in many cases. There's VARs involved. Okay, so there's that API, if you will, between us and the true vendor. A Cisco, for example, or a Juniper, a Dell. There's that API, if you want to use a coding or software piece that's involved. So who are we going to vet in that process? Are we going to vet our VARs, which really gets us nowhere? That's just checkbox supply chain security. So if I turn over a questionnaire or a vetting process to our VAR, who has to turn it over to Dell or Juniper or Cisco, do you think we're going to get that questionnaire back. The chances are probably pretty slim that we're actually going to get the questionnaire back. They're going to point us to someplace on a website, and that's going to be that's going to be the end of it probably. So my point of saying this is, and my point of answering a question with a question is to get people to realize how difficult it is to secure the supply chain. Even when you're dealing with the guys or gals that come in and clean your floors. Lots of times there's temp agencies that are involved in that you may not even know about. So as you're developing your supply chain, your supply chain security program, you have to decide first of all how deep you want to go, and whether you're ready to get the results. Because if you get the results back that for example with a cleaning company, and they're not doing any background investigations, is your business ready to terminate a contract over that? I mean, just because compliance and security comes in and says this is a risk doesn't mean that your business is going to accept that risk. I can tell you right now that most businesses, most CEOs, most CFOs are going to come back and say, "Oh, come on, these guys are sweeping the floors. They're taking the trash out," and so then we have to convince them that it really is a threat. And more than likely, those types of situations, unless you're in a financial industry environment, unless you're in a healthcare industry environment, most likely the pushback is going to occur, and you're not going to win that battle until an actual threat a threat becomes an actual attack, and you pay the price for that. So the supply chain is difficult to deal with. It is viewed by lots of people, especially in the financial side of things, as just one more space where the security officer, the CISO, is digging his hands into something that he has no need to do, or she has no need to do. But it's our job to go and convince them and sell it, evangelize the fact that there is a challenge out there and there is a situation, but we need to do so with proper risk analysis involved in it, and that that's the big challenge. So there is a risk, and how you address that in your company is always going to be a challenge right now, and until we start seeing major attacks directly coming through supply chain. Everybody's forgotten about Target with all the other stuff that's going on.
So I would say with cloud, he's exactly right? Because look at even Meltdown Inspector, right? And these were attacks against computer chips that AWS, Google, Azure, they all use within their system. So were you going to go all the way down to the chip maker when you're doing your third-party supply vendor audit, to say that, right? Probably not, and that's a really hard thing to do. I would say though that in a little bit of hope, I would say it's not all hopeless to do good supply chain management today. It's to look at your supply chain pool now as just a broader attack surface and where risk lies within that attack surface. So if a particular vendor, maybe not every vendor of yours, carries compliant regular data, but there is a vendor you interact with in your payments application, then maybe you pay a little more attention to that vendor than the people sweeping your floors, even though I think there's varying levels of risk at all aspects of the supply chain. But having a good idea of where your attack surface is more vulnerable, where that attack surface leads to critical systems or not, is ultimately really important. I would also say that the cloud has democratized access to a lot of things for people. So it's not just even thinking about external third-party vendors as supply chain, but even your own developers now kind of as part of that supply chain. Right. And I would say that Most of the risks these days and like all the major healthcare breaches last year were like S3 bucket open to the world. So it's that
S3 and
kind of,
Elasticsearch.
yep. So it's like those misconfigurations are becoming so much more of a, valuable target these days.
And reality is all of those were either shared responsibility or the responsibility was on not the supply chain,
Yep.
but on the owner of the data. Because I don't know about your environment, but we always make it very, very clear that the owner of the data, the ownership of the data never transfers, and that one of our customers are responsible. We will help them, but they're responsible for ensuring that the security, the proper security of their data based on their classification of the data is conducted. So if they come back to us and say, well, the data wasn't encrypted, we say, did you classify it and did you approach us on the subject? And so all those things, all those areas that you were talking about there, they're not really supply chain. They're in-house with the healthcare provider, with the financial provider, in taking that myth that AWS has put out there in saying that whatever you put in the cloud must be secure because we'll take care of it all, which is, you and I know, is not true and never will be.
Yeah, I mean, the way we talked to AWS about that is like, sure, cloud secure. How people use it though isn't, right? So you really have to start thinking about that behavioral element of that accidental risk is, and that goes back to the culture thing is, if I am responsible for deploying applications, how do I also take responsibility that those things are compliant, that they're configured properly, that I'm reporting controls, up the chain effectively, etc.
So how do you manage that internally? Because today anyone can throw up an environment. I mean, AWS has made it so anyone, I mean, startups today, it used to be that a startup's business plan had server costs on it. Today it's cloud costs, right? They've made the ease of starting an online business so smooth, and we see that also, by the way, with a lot of the skimming fraud that goes on with like the Magento and the WordPress sites and Shopify and all these other ones with the credit card skimming, and that's all cloud based, right? And that's kind of it's scary to think that we went from a gas station skimming device to an actual code on a website. How do you start addressing that internally within an organization?
Back to basics for one. So any interaction with the system is going to fall back on, do I have the right identity and access controls in place, or RBAC appropriately configured? So even if there is one of those configuration mistakes and somebody pops something, they can't move east-west laterally then, and and then I would say this is actually an area where you can leverage technology. So there's a whole new breed of tools that are kind of cloud security posture management tools that are just monitoring. Anytime the API changes in your cloud environment, a new server's deployed, the roles get changed. It's just monitoring that against a baseline policy. So if your basics are good and you know what your risk appetite is in terms of having MFA, having RBAC controls, not having certain ports open to the world, et cetera, then technology can actually help you do that in a continuous fashion to where anytime a developer deploys something and it is out of line with your risk profile, then it sends an alert and it can take varying actions on how proactive you want to be in allowing or disallowing them to go deploy according to that.
I don't think I have anything else to add. That was good. Yeah, it was.
Kind of before we kick it out to questions, what are some of your best practices about working well with external auditors in terms of streamlining that process, ensuring that it's done in a timely manner, and also that it's cost efficient? Because at the end of the day, I'd rather spend my auditing money on more tools and the next shiny box. But that's just because I'm a cyber guy and I like to play with that kind of shit. But
yeah, I'll go pretty quick on this and let Mark speak. I would say it is about that continuous first point in time attitude. So it's if you are continuously gathering evidence, if it's just part of your day-to-day business operations, it's not going to feel like a hassle to get all that stuff together for the audit come audit time. Yeah, I mean, That's the basis of it, is have your ducks in a row. And it's amazing also how much time you can guide the audit, right? There's kind of two ways of approaching an audit. Is you allow the auditor to come in there and let you know everything under the sun that they want you to do. And a lot of times you're going to be doing a lot of extra effort around putting controls in place, making sure systems are good. Or you can kind of guide the audit and say, here's all of our stuff, here's what we want you looking at. And that's not to like hide anything under the rug, but it's a matter of you controlling the conversation versus letting you kind of get caught up in the whirlwind of the audit.
I don't disagree with anything you said, except for I would use a different term, and I would manage the auditors.
That's a good word for it.
Guiding the auditors. So I come from a school, and I don't entirely agree with this, but I come from a school that taught me to be adversarial with the auditors. I quickly realized after I left that initial company that where I was dealing with auditors, that adversarial is probably not the best word or best process, but definitely managing them, challenging them. Don't be afraid to challenge an auditor whenever they're at, when they throw you a document request list and it's not right, or there are things on there that don't meet your needs or meet your control set. Challenge them on it. They don't own you, you own them. It's your environment. I can't tell you how many times I pushed back, on auditors that were trying to tell me how to run my environment. And I pushed back on them and said, okay, I've been around the block a time or two. That may work in an enterprise. I'm a data center and I am a cloud or a co-location service provider. It's a different ball game than an enterprise, and most of these auditors are enterprise related. The other thing that I would manage them on, besides the document request list, besides challenging them back, is using the contract to very clearly set the time frames, because I can't tell you how many times the auditors will get all over you when your documents are due to them, but then when it comes time for you to get a draft copy of the audit to review, and when it comes time for them to deliver the final copy of the audit, you're sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting. Have it specifically in the contract and put penalties in place if they don't deliver on time. Financial penalties in place if they don't deliver it on time. That does not, so I've had auditors push back, and that does not change their integrity in their auditing process. What it means is they may have to work at night, or they may have to work on the weekends. And if you do it right and you put the dates in that are proper, and the expectations should be fine for them to hit their dates. But manage that. And when they're late, ask them where it's at. Today was the day that it was supposed to be due, and it's 5 o'clock. Send them an email at 5:01. Where's my document? Let them know. This goes back to managing them versus guiding them. Let them know that you're on top of these guys and that you're the boss, not them. Because a lot of them will try and manage you instead of the other way. Tell you how to operate your environment. So the other thing with that is, make sure you select the right controls to be audited against. Don't let them tell you what controls to audit. You can select the controls based on your environment. Now, there are some situations where there are controls that they have to audit against in order to maintain integrity of the audit and so on and so forth. But make sure that you're the one that is at least approving the controls, and that you understand the controls when you approve them, because these will follow you all through.
Questions in a room full of auditors. Questions? We're going to go shy again. We're going to go shy again. We could talk more. Fire up another question.
So, Mark, I realize you're in a different situation being a data center compared to many companies that are maybe providing a SaaS service or some other service. But
Sure.
Do you find yourself in the situation, and if so, how do you deal with it, where the customers, even though you have a contract that says they can send you a questionnaire, they're asking for evidence that is, continuing to proliferate that questionnaire ad nauseum? How do you handle that?
So we have two sides of that. One, we have customers who send us requests for artifacts and evidence that are none of their business. They're internal documents, their internal policies, their internal controls. We point them right back to the SSA 18 and we list exactly what number or whichever audit it is. So I'm going to use the 18 as an example. Send them right back to the SS 18. We point them right to the number that says this has already been evaluated by ours. Your SS 18 auditor is obliged to accept that because it's been done by an accredited, another accredited CPA firm. So that's one side. The flip side of it is if they're asking for artifacts and evidence that are legitimate for their environment, and it's outside of the documentation or the stuff that we've already made self-service available, we say thank you very much. And if it's not too much, if it's just a little screenshot here or there, we're gonna be nice and we're gonna give it to them and we're gonna go. And by the way, here's how you could do that for yourself in the future. If it is cumbersome and is time intensive, we're going to say we'd be happy to do that for you at X number of dollars an hour for time and materials. We're not a charity. We're a business that's making money, just like 99.9% of our other customers are. And so when you push back on them like that and you're polite about it, instead of, oh, I did it and now you owe me the money, typically the decision is made not that they don't actually need that artifact. But when they actually do, then they'll be happy to pay for it. But there's always wiggle room in everything. So
What's your take on allowing external auditors to come in and use their tools on your network?
no,
At all? No, period?
pretty much.
Okay.
Because here's the deal. Everything's a shared environment inside the cloud side of things, and on the co-location side, it's their environment. So on the co-location side, they can bring their tools in and run against their own internet connection and their boundary on down all they want. Okay, so when I say no, I'm talking about a true cloud shared type of environment. And the answer is no, because I already do it for myself. And it's covered under the SS 18 or the PCI or whatever audit it is, number one. Number two, a shared environment type of situation it could interrupt and disrupt another customer, and I can't take that risk. Now, let me drill down on your question a little bit, because I don't want to sound like I'm the cis no and the black and white guy that's going to go absolutely no. Okay. When I say no, I'm talking about my boundary. Now, there's this thing called a firewall, and underneath that firewall, the way we have things set up, even though there's a network in there, and it's our IP addresses and all that kind of stuff, it's still self-contained in there. And what we'll do is we will, if they're wanting to do a penetration test or inside the firewall, or if they're wanting to do scans inside the firewall on their environment, yeah, we've got a document that tells them their limitations, and we make them sign it, and we also make them sign essentially a liability saying, hey, if you take it down, it's not our problem. We'll help you get it back up, but it's going to be time and materials. So I deliberately answered no very quickly, because I wanted to get that message through. Reality is there's some gray area. Reality is that each boundary section has a different answer, and that's the teaching piece of it that I wanted to get through. Because you go to AWS and their answer is absolutely no. I don't care if it's inside your boundary or not. But in an organization like ours, where it's truly a shared environment, where it's something that we communicate about and we talk about, there is a piece that you can operate within and conduct penetration testing and conduct efforts against that, as long as you're willing to accept some of the risk and liability.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Same as what he said.
I can answer that. They want to put anything they can get away with.
Yeah, see, I don't.
So,
That's why I'm
so
like,
they're, you know, I've got customers that come in, they want to put Nmap and run, you know, verbose. I've got customers that have wanted to come in and put appliances in the network to run penetration testing and different things.
pen testing, I can see that's a different animal, but like from an audit perspective, I don't know why an auditor. I mean, I used to audit.
Because
I don't want to bring someone else's network down.
Right.
You should be able to generate the data I'm asking for.
Because PCI requires pen testing twice a year as
Well,
part of the audit.
Well, yeah, but that would, to me, it's another vendor. It's not me as. So as even for, I'm looking to an ASV or some other certified pen tester to do the pen testing, but as an auditor,
Yeah.
they should want to.
No, inside of our type of environments, the auditors themselves will sell the pen testing
Oh,
services.
see, yeah, okay.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. So like with our FedRAMP assessment,
Yeah.
part of the assessment requirement is that the 3PAO does the penetration testing.
Got it, okay.
I don't have a choice to go and contract that out to my guy and who I want to.
Yeah.
It is part of the contract that I sign.
Okay, got
So
it.
yeah.
All right, I see.
Any other questions? Awesome. Give them a hand, folks. Both panels that you heard today will be available on our podcast. So you can subscribe now if you haven't yet on your favorite podcast streaming platform. They'll be available over the next few weeks so you can listen to them. Thank you for Armor for hosting us. Thank you to the guys at Remediant for making this possible. Thanks, Mark and Patrick, for your generous time donation today. I've got a 25-year-old bottle of scotch coming your way. Yeah, I spoil them. But they deserve it. They're awesome. Give them a hand, folks. Again, thank you to our host, Armor Terry. Thank you. You're the best. That's it. We're a wrap. Help yourself to food, drink, beer. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and thank you so much for coming.